Effective immediately. My name is Randy. I'm 47 years old, and I've been managing client relations for Brumell Boworks for 15 years. When the new director, Jessica, spoke those words in front of my entire team, I just nodded, kept my hand steady on the conference table. "I hope the client presentation goes well on Friday," I said. The room went quiet. My team, people I'd hired, trained, watched grow from junior associates to department leads, stared at the table. Jessica's eyes narrowed. She was 32, MBA from some fancy school, brought in 3 months ago to modernize operations. Never worked a day in biotech before. "What do you mean?" she asked. I smiled. "You'll figure it out." I walked to my office and started packing. 23 years of work fitting into 2 cardboard boxes. Photos of successful product launches. Awards from satisfied clients. The coffee mug my daughter gave me that said, "World's Best Dad." Jessica followed me, hovering in the doorway like she wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. "Randy, about the Hollow Gate account." "Not my problem anymore," I said, taping up the first box. She left me alone after that. My team filtered by one. They didn't say much, just quiet handshakes and promises to stay in touch. Beth, my senior analyst, lingered the longest. "This is wrong," she whispered. "It's business," I told her. But we both knew it wasn't. The truth was, I'd seen this coming for weeks. Ever since Jessica arrived, she'd been undermining me in small ways, scheduling meetings without me, questioning my decisions in front of clients. Last week, she'd suggested to upper management that my old-school approach was holding the company back. What she didn't know was that I'd been keeping detailed records, every slight, every attempt to cut me out. I'd also been preparing for the worst-case scenario, because in 15 years of managing million-dollar accounts, you learn to plan for everything. I loaded my boxes into my truck and drove home. My wife, Helen, was waiting with coffee and the kind of look that said she already knew what happened. "How bad?" she asked. "Could be worse," I said. But sitting there in my kitchen looking at those boxes, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not anger, not sadness, something sharper. Jessica had made a mistake, a big one, and she wouldn't realize it until Friday morning when Hollowgate Systems called asking where their presentation was. The presentation that only I knew how to deliver. I'd started at Brumell straight out of college. Back then, it was a small company with big dreams and bigger problems. The founder, old William Brumell, took a chance on a kid with no experience, but plenty of hunger. I spent my first 5 years learning everything. Lab procedures, regulatory compliance, client psychology. By 30, I was running the client relations department. By 35, I was the guy companies called when they needed biotech solutions fast and done right. I'd built relationships that kept Brimvale afloat during the recession of 2008. When competitors folded, we thrived because our clients trusted me. Helen understood the demands, the late-night calls from overseas clients, the weekend trips to secure new contracts. She raised our daughter Casey while I built something that mattered. Something that provided for our family and employed 63 people. But things started changing when William retired 2 years ago. His son Marcus took over as CEO and brought in consultants who spoke in buzzwords and saw employees as line items. Jessica was one of those consultants who'd somehow convinced Marcus she could optimize our client engagement strategy. The warning signs were there from day one. She'd arrive at client meetings with no background knowledge, then interrupt me mid-presentation to suggest changes that made no sense. She reorganized my filing system without asking. Worst of all, she started scheduling calls with my biggest clients, claiming she needed to assess their satisfaction levels. 3 weeks ago, I'd walked into the office early and heard her on the phone with someone from corporate. Rye's methods are outdated. She was saying, "The clients respect him, but they need fresh thinking. I can deliver the same results with half the overhead." Half the overhead meant cutting my team. People like Beth, who'd worked nights to master the Hollowgate account specifications, or Tom, who'd learned Mandarin just to communicate better with our Shanghai partners. I should have confronted her then. Instead, I did. What I always did. I focused on the work. The Hollowgate presentation was our biggest pitch of the year, a $30 million contract for specialized biosensors. I'd been preparing for 8 months building relationships with their technical team, understanding their exact requirements. Jessica knew about the meeting, but not the details. In her mind, presentations were PowerPoint slides and generic talking points. She didn't understand that Hollowgate's chief technology officer hated formal presentations, that their procurement director only trusted vendors who could speak her language, precise, technical, no fluff. The irony was perfect. Jessica had fired me to look decisive and forward-thinking, but Friday morning, when Hollowgate called asking for Randy specifically, she'd learned the difference between managing people and managing relationships. Thursday night, I couldn't sleep. Not from worry, from anticipation. Helen found me in the kitchen at 2 a.m., sitting with a cup of coffee and my laptop. "You're planning something," she said, just thinking. She sat down across from me. 22 years of marriage taught her when to push and when to wait. This was a waiting moment. Jessica called earlier. I finally said, left 3 voicemails. What did she want? Details about the Hollowgate presentation. Helen smiled. She'd been there for every late night, every weekend I'd spent building those client relationships. She understood what I'd built better than anyone. "What did you tell her?" "Nothing. I'm not her employee anymore." That was when it hit me. The full scope of what Jessica had done. She hadn't just fired me. She destroyed 15 years of institutional knowledge, client preferences, technical specifications, relationship dynamics that took years to develop. The Hollowgate account wasn't just about a presentation. It was about trust built through dozens of smaller interactions, like remembering that their lead engineer preferred technical drawings over flowcharts, or knowing that their CEO made decisions based on implementation timelines, not cost savings. Jessica thought she could wing it, show up with a standard pitch deck, and charm her way through $30 million in business. She had no idea that Hollowgate's team would be expecting the detailed technical breakdown I'd promised them, the one that existed only in my head and in notes they'd never find. I opened my laptop and looked at my calendar. Hollowgate was scheduled for 10 a.m. Friday. By 11 a.m., Jessica would be sitting in Marcus's office trying to explain why their biggest client of the year had walked out after 20 minutes. My phone buzzed. Text message from Beth. "Jessica's been in your office all day looking for files. She seems panicked." I typed back, "Files are on the server. She has access to everything." Which was true. She had access to contracts, basic client information, standard presentation templates. What she didn't have was context, the human element that turned data into relationships. I poured another cup of coffee and opened a new document on my laptop. Started typing my resignation letter, the formal one I should have submitted months ago when I first realized what Jessica was doing. But then I stopped, deleted everything. Why make it easy for her? Instead, I opened my personal email and started reaching out to contacts at other biotech companies, people who'd been trying to recruit me for years. By morning, I had 3 interview requests and 1 job offer. Helen woke up at 6 a.m. and found me still at the kitchen table, now dressed for the day. "Going somewhere?" she asked. "Coffee shop downtown. Good Wi-Fi. Quiet place to make some calls." She kissed my forehead. Give them hell. I didn't plan to give anyone hell. I planned to let Jessica do that all by herself. Friday morning at 9:47 a.m., I was sitting in Brewster's coffee house downtown when my phone started ringing. Jessica. I let it go to voicemail. Then she called again and again. By 10:15, she'd called 7 times. At 10:23, Beth called. "Randy, where are you?" "The Hollowgate people are here and Jessica's having a meltdown. She can't find the technical specifications they're asking for." "They're in the system," I said, stirring my coffee. "She says they're not. She's been up all night looking." Tell her to check the project folder under Hologate System subsection Technical Requirements. Beth went quiet for a moment. Randy, she says that folder is empty except for basic contact information. I almost smiled. That's because the technical specs were never digitized. They're in my notebook, the blue one that lived on my desk, the one you took home yesterday, the one I took home yesterday. Beth was quiet for a long moment. They're asking for you specifically. The CTO said he was looking forward to discussing the sensor calibration protocols you developed. Wish I could help. At 10:45, Marcus called the CEO himself. Randy, I need you to come in. There's been a misunderstanding. No misunderstanding. I was terminated yesterday. Effective immediately. I believe Jessica said, "Look, we can work this out." Maybe Jessica was hasty. Maybe she was, but I'm not an employee anymore, Marcus. I can't legally represent Brimill in client meetings as a consultant. Then, name your rate. I'm not available. Which was true. I had a phone interview with Drift Shade Limited at 2 p.m. Their VP of Business Development had called personally after receiving my resume that morning. By 11:30, according to Beth's texts, the Hologate team had left. They'd given Jessica 20 minutes to produce the technical documentation they'd specifically requested. When she couldn't deliver, they'd politely excused themselves and said they'd reassess their options. Jessica called again at noon. This time I answered, "Randy, you have to help me. This is sabotage. This is consequences. I can report you for corporate sabotage, withholding company information." What information? I removed personal belongings from my office. The notebooks were mine. I bought them with my own money. All official company files remain on the server. You know, that's not how this works. Actually, it's exactly how it works. I was terminated without cause and without notice. Brim forfeited any claim to my cooperation. She hung up. 10 minutes later, security called asking me to return my company notebooks. I told them to check my employment contract. Personal notebooks purchased with personal funds remained personal property. At 1:30, Helen called laughing. Casey just texted me. She saw Jessica on LinkedIn posting about exciting new opportunities at Brimill. Apparently, she's trying to spin this as a positive restructuring. How's that working out? 3 of your former clients have already posted asking where you went. Word travels fast in biotech. By 3 p.m., after a very promising phone interview with Drift Jade, I had my answer to Jessica's earlier question about sabotage. This wasn't sabotage. Sabotage implied I'd actively worked to damage something. I'd done nothing except take my knowledge with me when they showed me the door. The fact that Jessica hadn't bothered to learn how the department actually functioned, that was her choice. The fact that she'd fired the only person who understood the intricacies of their biggest accounts, that was her decision. I'd spent 15 years building something valuable. Jessica had spent 15 minutes destroying it. Now she was learning what that knowledge was actually worth. My phone buzzed with another text from Beth. Holly'd called. They want to know if you're available for freelance consultation. Apparently they're very unhappy with Brimville's lack of preparation. I typed back. Tell them I'm not available. But they might want to consider Drift Shade Limited for their biotech needs. Sometimes the best revenge is simply stepping out of the way and letting people face the consequences of their own actions. Saturday morning brought clarity in the form of a phone call from Tom, my former colleague from the Shanghai team. "Randy, I need to tell you something," he said. "I probably should have told you weeks ago." I poured coffee and sat down. "I'm listening. Jessica's been calling our international clients, not for relationship building, for information. She wanted to know about contract terms, renewal dates, pricing structures, things she should have learned from internal files. The picture became clearer. What else? She asked me to send her copies of all my client correspondence. Said it was for quality assurance review. When I told her that was already logged in the CRM system, she insisted she needed the originals. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Did you send them? No. But Randy, I think she was building a case against you, trying to prove you were hiding information or mismanaging accounts. That explained the sudden interest in my methods, the questions about my client relationships. Jessica hadn't been trying to learn from me. She'd been trying to replace me with documentation she could control. There's more. Tom continued. Yesterday, after the Hollowgate disaster, she called an emergency meeting, told everyone that you deliberately withheld critical information to sabotage the company, and Beth shut that down fast, pointed out that you'd offered to train Jessica on all your accounts when she first arrived. Jessica had declined, saying she preferred to develop her own approaches. I remembered that conversation. 3 months ago, I'd spent an entire weekend preparing training materials for Jessica. Detailed client profiles, communication preferences, technical requirements. She'd glanced through them and said traditional relationship management was too time-intensive for modern business practices. "What's the mood in the office?" I asked. Tense. Marcus called an all-hands meeting for Monday. Word is he's bringing in external consultants to assess the client relations crisis. After Tom hung up, I sat thinking about the deeper implications. Jessica hadn't just fired me impulsively. She'd been planning it for weeks. The Hollowgate presentation was supposed to be her proof that she could handle my responsibilities. A successful meeting would have validated her approach and justified my termination. Instead, it had exposed how little she understood about the work she'd inherited. My phone rang. Drift Shade Limited. Randy, this is Patricia Patricia Holloway from Drift Shade. We'd like to schedule an in-person interview for Monday. Our team was very impressed with your experience. I'd be interested to hear more. Frankly, we've been watching Bramill's recent changes with concern. Several of our partners have mentioned disruptions in their client service. We're looking for someone who understands the importance of relationship-based business development. After she hung up, I realized Jessica had done me a favor. For years, I'd been comfortable at Bramall. Good salary, familiar routines, established relationships, but I'd stopped growing. I'd become so focused on maintaining what I'd built that I'd forgotten there were other places to build. Helen found me in the garage that afternoon, organizing tools I hadn't touched in months. "Productive day?" she asked. "Enlightening day. I have an interview Monday with Drift Shade. They're offering a 20% salary increase and equity options. That's wonderful, but you don't seem happy about it." I put down the wrench I'd been holding. I keep thinking about my team, Beth, Tom, the others. They're good people caught in Jessica's mess. You can't save everyone, Randy. You can only control what you do next. She was right. Jessica had made her choices. Now she'd live with the consequences. My job was to make better choices for my own future. Monday morning, I put on my best suit and drove to Drift Shade Limited's headquarters in downtown Kansas City. The interview went better than expected. By noon, I had a formal offer. Senior Director of Client Relations, 25% salary increase, full benefits, and a signing bonus that would cover Casey's college tuition for the next 2 years. I accepted on the spot. Walking out of their offices, I felt lighter than I had in months. Not because of the money, because of the possibilities. Drift Shade was growing fast, landing contracts with pharmaceutical giants and research universities. They needed someone who understood how to build lasting client relationships in a competitive market. Someone exactly like me. My phone buzzed with a text from Beth. Bramill's stock dropped 3% this morning. Word about Hollowgate is getting around. I wasn't surprised. In biotech, reputation traveled fast. Lose one major client through poor preparation, and others started questioning your reliability. Jessica's modernization was looking more like incompetence with each passing day. Tuesday, the Kansas City Business Journal published a brief article about Hollowgate Systems selecting Drift Shade Limited for their BioAnswer project. The $30 million contract I'd spent 8 months developing was now going to my new employer. Wednesday, Tom called with an update. Marcus fired Jessica yesterday effective immediately. How's the team handling it? Relief, mostly, but there's talk about bringing in another outside consultant to assess department efficiency. I felt a pang of sympathy for my former colleagues. They'd survived Jessica's brief reign, but corporate restructuring was like a virus. Once it started, it was hard to stop. Tom, can I ask you something? Sure. Are you happy at Bromeo? Long pause. Not really. Why? Drift Shade is expanding. They're looking for international business development specialists. Someone with your experience and language skills would be valuable. Are you serious? I start Monday. If you're interested, I can set up an interview. Thursday, Patricia Holloway called with an interesting proposition. Randy, we've been thinking about expanding our pharmaceutical consulting division. We'd need someone to head it up, someone with deep industry knowledge and established relationships. That's a significant expansion. We're prepared to make significant investments. The question is whether you know anyone who might be interested in building something from the ground up. I thought about Beth, about her expertise in regulatory compliance and her frustrated ambition, about how Jessica had passed her over for promotion 3 times. I might know someone. Friday afternoon, I drove to Brewster's Coffee House, the same place where I'd watched Jessica's world collapse a week earlier. This time, I was meeting Beth. Randy, I can't believe what you're offering. Believe it. Drift Shade wants to build a pharmaceutical consulting division. You'd be the founding director. Full autonomy, competitive salary, and the chance to build something significant. What about Tom? Already accepted. He starts Monday as International Business Development Manager. Beth stared at her coffee for a long moment. Marcus offered me your old position yesterday, Department Head for Client Relations. Are you taking it? I was planning to until now. Bromell will be fine. They'll hire someone new, rebuild what they lost, but it'll take years. And Drift Shade. Drift Shade is moving forward with or without us. The question is whether we want to be part of building something new or fixing something broken. She smiled for the first time since I'd known her. When do I start? By the end of the week, Drift Shade had hired 3 former Bromell employees. Not through poaching or recruitment, through opportunity. We weren't running from something. We were running towards something better. Jessica had taught us all a valuable lesson about the difference between managing people and leading them. Now, we had the chance to put that lesson to use. 3 months later, I was sitting in a conference room at Drift Shade's expanded offices reviewing quarterly results with Patricia Holloway and the executive team. The numbers were impressive. Pharmaceutical consulting division up 200%. International contracts increased by 150%. Client satisfaction scores at an all-time high. Randy, your team has exceeded every projection we made. Patricia said, the Hollowgate implementation alone has generated 5 new contract inquiries. Beth, now Director of Pharmaceutical Consulting, smiled from across the table. The regulatory approval process went smoother than anyone expected. When clients see that kind of efficiency, word spreads fast. Tom joined by video from Shanghai where he was closing a deal with a major research hospital. The international expansion is ahead of schedule. We're looking at 3 new markets next quarter. That afternoon, I received an unexpected email. Marcus Brimville wanted to meet for coffee. We met at Brewster's Coffee House. It seemed appropriate. Marcus looked older, more tired than I remembered. Randy, I owe you an apology, he said. I made a mistake with Jessica. A big one. How's Brimville doing? Surviving. We lost 4 major clients after the Hollowgate situation. Had to lay off 15 people. Stock price still. Hasn't recovered. He stirred his coffee slowly. Jessica cost us more than clients. She cost us institutional knowledge. Relationships that took years to build. You can rebuild. Maybe, but it won't be the same. He looked up. I heard about your success at Drift Shade, the pharmaceutical division, the international expansion. That should have been Bromell's growth. I didn't say anything. There wasn't much to say. Would you consider coming back? I could offer you Jessica's position, VP of Operations, full authority over client relations, business development, everything. I'm happy where I am, Marcus. Double your current salary. It's not about money." He sat back in his chair. "Then what is it about?" "Trust. When you hired Jessica, you chose to believe that relationships don't matter. That experience can be replaced with efficiency. That was your choice. I was wrong. Yes, you were. But the damage is done. Your clients don't trust Bremail anymore. Your employees don't trust leadership. And frankly, I don't trust you not to make the same mistake again." Marcus left without finishing his coffee. As I watched him walk away, I felt something I hadn't expected. Pity. He'd learned an expensive lesson about the value of experience and loyalty. 6 months after my termination, Drift Shade Limited announced a major acquisition, the pharmaceutical consulting assets of 3 smaller biotech firms, creating the largest independent consulting practice in the Midwest. I was named Senior Vice President of Strategic Development. The announcement made the front page of the Kansas City Business Journal. The article mentioned my previous role at Bremail, noting how my departure had preceded their recent struggles. Jessica, according to LinkedIn, had taken a position with a startup in Denver. Her profile emphasized her experience in organizational transformation and change management. There was no mention of Brimvale or what that transformation had actually accomplished. The poetic justice wasn't lost on me. In trying to prove that relationships don't matter, she destroyed the relationships that kept Brimvale competitive. In trying to show that experience is replaceable, she'd eliminated the experience that made them valuable. Beth and Tom thrived in their new roles. The team we'd built at Drift Shade was everything Jessica claimed modern business should be: efficient, results-driven, and profitable. The difference was that we built it on a foundation of mutual respect and shared knowledge, not corporate buzzwords and arbitrary restructuring. Last week, Casey called from college with news that made everything worthwhile. "Dad, my business professor used your story as a case study about the importance of institutional knowledge and relationship management. She called it the Brim-Vale mistake. What did you tell her?" "That my dad always said the best revenge is living well." Helen was right as usual. You can't save everyone. You can only control what you do next. 6 months later, Bremail's board of directors forced Marcus to step down as CEO after a series of failed client acquisitions and mounting financial losses. Jessica's startup in Denver folded within 8 months, leaving her explaining the gap in her resume to increasingly skeptical employers. The organizational transformation she'd championed became a cautionary tale taught in business schools across the country. Sometimes the most satisfying victories are the ones where you never have to throw a punch.